The human soldier whispered in the queen's ear, and the queen said, "Stop the war." The battlefield had no sky left. Smoke and burning metal covered everything, turning day into a dark gray dusk. Explosions rolled like distant thunder, shaking the broken ground again and again. Alien ships burned in the air above, falling like dying stars. Human dropships lay scattered across the ruins, some still smoking, others silent forever. The Velthari capital world was not meant to be touched by enemy boots. For centuries, no army had reached its inner city. Yet now humans were here, bleeding and exhausted, fighting in a place the galaxy said they should never reach. Sergeant Elias Rook moved through the rubble with slow, careful steps. His armor was cracked and dark with ash. One lens of his helmet was shattered, leaving his right eye exposed to the heat and dust. He had been wounded twice already, but he did not stop. He had learned long ago that stopping meant dying. Around him, human soldiers fought and fell. They were not the strongest species. They were not the fastest. Their weapons were simple compared to Velthari biotech blades and living cannons. But they kept moving forward. Even when retreat orders came, some missions had no retreat. This was one of them. The order had been clear: break into the inner palace. Cause as much chaos as possible. Delay the Velthari advance so the coalition fleets could escape. No extraction planned, no rescue. Disposable, some alien commanders had called them. Elias did not think about that now. He focused on each breath, on each step. On the small human habit of surviving one moment at a time. Velthari defenders moved like shadows between the ruins. Tall and sharp, their armor grown rather than built, their weapons humming with energy. They were beautiful in a terrible way. Every movement showed confidence, the kind that comes from winning wars for generations. A Velthari warrior leapt from above, blade raised. Elias rolled aside, fired once, then again. The alien fell without a sound. Elias paused only long enough to close the warrior's eyes, a habit he never broke, no matter the species. He whispered something under his breath, then moved on. The palace rose ahead of him, vast and broken, its once smooth towers cracked by orbital strikes. Even damaged, it was massive, built to show power and control. At its center stood the throne hall, where Queen Zyranel commanded the war. Most soldiers avoided thinking about her. Velthari queens were not just rulers. They were said to be living weapons, their minds capable of crushing lesser beings with thought alone. Even trained psi-shields often failed near them. Elias had read the reports. He had studied the history. Humans had learned quickly that knowing the enemy mattered as much as fighting them. A shockwave knocked him off his feet as a nearby wall collapsed. He slammed into the ground, gasping as pain flared through his ribs. His vision blurred, but he forced himself up. Blood ran down his side, warm and sticky. His comm crackled with broken voices, orders overlapped, then silence. He was alone. Elias entered the palace through a shattered archway. Inside, the air felt different, heavy, pressing. Every step felt like walking through water. The psychic presence of the queen pressed against his mind, testing him. Other species would have collapsed. Many already had. Alien corpses lay scattered across the floor, their minds burned out by the queen's defense field. Elias staggered, then steadied himself. He remembered his training. Breathe. Focus on something real, a sound, a memory, a promise. He thought of Earth, of rain hitting metal roofs, of shared meals in quiet places, of laughter in between battles. The pressure eased just enough. Velthari guards noticed him then. They turned in surprise. A single human, damaged and slow, walking toward the heart of their empire. Weapons lifted, but they hesitated. Something about him felt wrong or different. Elias did not raise his gun. He kept walking. The throne hall opened before him, wide and tall, its ceiling broken open to the burning sky. At the far end stood Queen Zyranel. She was taller than any Velthari soldier, her form elegant and terrible. Her eyes glowed with ancient power. Around her the air shimmered, bending light and thought alike. Fallen enemies lay scattered at her feet. She turned her gaze to Elias. Pain slammed into his mind like a hammer. He dropped to one knee, teeth clenched, breath shaking. Images flooded his thoughts. Fear, despair. Submission, he screamed, not in terror, but in effort. Slowly, painfully, he stood again. The queen tilted her head, curiosity replacing anger. No human had ever resisted her this long. None had ever stood so close. Guards moved to intercept him, but she lifted one clawed hand. They froze. Elias stopped a few steps away. His weapon slipped from his fingers and hit the floor with a dull sound. He raised his empty hands to show he was no threat. The queen studied him, her voice echoing inside his head rather than through the air. "Why do you stand, human?" Elias swallowed. Speaking aloud felt impossible. The pressure was too strong. Instead, he leaned forward. He moved closer. Gasps rippled through the hall. Velthari nobles watching from hidden chambers cried out in shock. No one had ever approached the queen like this. Elias reached her side close enough to feel the heat of her energy field. His legs trembled. His vision dimmed. He knew he had only seconds. He leaned toward her ear, and he whispered. The words were quiet, soft. They carried no threat, no demand. The queen's body stiffened. Her eyes widened just slightly. The psychic pressure vanished in an instant like a storm cut cleanly in half. Elias collapsed to the floor, gasping for air, his chest burning as his lungs remembered how to breathe. Silence filled the hall. Queen Zyranel straightened slowly. She looked out across the battlefield, visible through the broken ceiling. Ships burned. Lives ended every second. Her voice rang out, no longer inside minds, but through space itself, carried by every command channel, every psychic relay. Stop the war. Across the planet, weapons powered down. Fighters froze mid-attack. Armies halted in confusion. Orders repeated, then repeated again, unable to change. Human commanders stared at their screens in disbelief. Velthari generals fell silent, their certainty shattered. In the throne hall, Elias lay on the cold floor, barely conscious. He did not hear the chaos spreading across the galaxy. He only felt hands lifting him gently, not in anger, but care. The queen looked down at the human soldier, her expression unreadable. For the first time in centuries, the Velthari Empire was still, and it had begun with a whisper. The silence that followed the queen's command felt heavier than the war itself. Across the Velthari capital world, weapons shut down with confused clicks and fading glows. Living cannons curled in on themselves. War beasts lowered their heads, unsure why their rage had vanished. In orbit, massive fleets drifted without orders, engines humming but unmoving. No one celebrated, no one cheered. This silence was not peace, it was shock. Inside the throne hall, Elias Rook drifted in and out of consciousness. His body felt cold, then warm, then cold again. Strange hands lifted him, careful and steady. He expected pain, he expected chains. Instead, there was none. When his eyes opened, he was no longer on the stone floor. He lay on a smooth surface that gently adjusted to his breathing. The light above him was soft and blue, not harsh like battlefield lamps. For a moment he thought he was dead. Then he remembered the whisper. He tried to sit up, but his body refused. Every muscle screamed in protest. A quiet sound escaped his throat. "You are alive," a calm voice said. Elias turned his head slowly. A Velthari stood nearby, taller than him even without armor. This one wore long robes instead of battle plating. Its eyes held no hatred, only focus. "Do not move," the Velthari said. "Your injuries are being treated." Elias laughed weakly. "By aliens." The Velthari did not react to the tone. "By physicians," it replied. "Species is irrelevant." Elias closed his eyes again. Somewhere far away, alarms echoed, then faded. The war was still stopped. That much he could feel, even without a comm unit. News spread faster than any weapon ever had. On coalition command ships, human officers argued loudly. Some believed the halt was a trap. Others demanded immediate retreat. A few stared at the data feeds in silence, replaying the moment again and again. One human soldier, one whisper. A galactic war paused. On Velthari worlds, panic spread through noble houses and military ranks. Queens were absolute. Their commands were never questioned. But this command had shaken the very core of the empire. Why had she stopped? And why for a human? Queen Zyranel stood alone in a high chamber overlooking the city. Fires still burned in the distance, but no new explosions followed. She felt the unrest in her people like static against her mind. Fear, anger, confusion, all of it aimed inward. Behind her, the royal council gathered, careful to keep distance. None dared speak first. Finally, one stepped forward. Elder Threx, ancient even by Velthari standards, his voice steady but strained. "You halted a victorious war," he said. "For a human." Zyranel did not turn. "I halted a pointless one." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. "The coalition was breaking," another counselor said. "Their fleets were fleeing, we could have ended them." "And become what?" the queen asked quietly. "We once feared." Silence followed. The words Elias had whispered still echoed in her mind. Not loudly, not sharply, but clearly, like a memory she had tried to bury. She had felt it the moment he spoke, not psychic force, not threat, recognition, a truth she could not deny. "He is a weapon," Threx said, "or a spy." "Humans are not known for mercy." Zyranel finally turned, her eyes burning with warning. "You know nothing of humans," she said. "That is why you fear them." Meanwhile, Elias awoke again to a different room. This one had clear walls showing the city beyond. Velthari architecture curved and flowed, grown rather than built. He had never imagined seeing it from this angle, alive and breathing. Two guards stood nearby, unmoving. Their weapons were inactive. A small device hovered near his arm, humming softly. He realized it was repairing tissue, sealing wounds, stabilizing bone. He let out a slow breath. "So," he muttered, "this is how it ends." One guard glanced at him, confused. "Ends," it repeated. "Your life is not scheduled for termination." Elias blinked. "Scheduled." The guard seemed uncomfortable. "War terminology." Footsteps approached. The guard straightened instantly. Queen Zyranel entered the chamber. Elias felt the pressure again, but weaker this time, controlled. She looked at him not as an enemy, but as something difficult to understand. "You are awake," she said. "Seems that way," Elias replied, his voice rough. "You disobeyed every known survival instinct," she continued. "You approached me unarmed. Why?" Elias stared at the ceiling for a long moment. "Because shooting you wouldn't end anything." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "You knew I would not kill you." "No," he said honestly. "I knew you might." "Then why?" Elias turned his head to face her. "Because someone had to remind you." The guard stiffened, but the queen raised a hand. "Remind me of what?" she asked. Elias swallowed. His throat felt dry. "Of who you were before the war made you forget." The queen said nothing. Across the galaxy, reactions continued to grow. On neutral worlds, citizens gathered in streets, watching broadcasts in disbelief. Children who had grown up under constant war sirens experienced silence for the first time. Traders reopened channels. Refugee ships stopped running. Many feared the pause would end suddenly. Others prayed it would not. Humanity found itself under a new kind of attention. Once dismissed as weak and expendable, humans were now seen as unpredictable. Dangerous not because of their weapons, but because of their thinking. Because they studied enemies deeply enough to speak words that could stop an empire, Velthari warlords did not share the queen's restraint. On a distant command station, General Carvex slammed his claw into a console. "This is weakness," he roared. "The queen has been compromised." His officers shifted uneasily. "We do not need her," Carvex continued. "We will finish the war ourselves." Orders went out in secret channels. Hidden fleets powered up. Loyalists prepared to move. Back in the palace, Elias felt the mood change before anyone spoke. Years of soldier instinct told him something was wrong. "You have enemies," he said quietly to the queen. She studied him. "Of course. They won't stop just because you said so." "No," she agreed. "They will test me." Elias closed his eyes briefly. "Humans do that too." The queen tilted her head. "And what do humans do when leaders are tested?" Elias opened his eyes again. "We decide what kind of people we want to be, then we defend that choice." Something like respect flickered across her expression. "You asked for nothing in return," she said. "Not mercy, not escape." "I asked for the war to stop," Elias replied. "That was enough." She stepped closer. "You will remain here for your own safety." Elias almost laughed. "Funny, that's what my commanders never said." Outside the chamber, the palace trembled slightly as distant engines activated without permission. Alarms began to rise, low and warning. The queen felt it instantly. "So," Elias said, his voice calm despite everything, "this is the part where it gets harder." Zyranel looked out over her city, then back at the human soldier who had changed her path. "Yes," she said, "now we see if peace can survive." Far above, hidden fleets began to move. And the quiet after the whisper was about to be tested. The palace alarms did not scream. They hummed low and steady, a warning meant only for those who understood what it meant. Queen Zyranel felt the change ripple through her empire like a wrong note in a long song. Unauthorized fleets were moving. Loyalists and rebels alike were choosing sides. Elias Rook felt it too, though in a different way. Years of war had trained him to notice small changes. The way guards stood a little straighter. The way the air felt tighter, as if everyone was holding their breath. "They're not listening," Elias said quietly. "No," the queen replied. "Some never would." She turned and left the chamber, and after a brief hesitation, she gestured for Elias to follow. Velthari physicians protested, warning that his body was not ready. She ignored them. "He walks," she said. "That is enough." Elias moved slowly but steadily beside her, supported by a light brace around his ribs. Guards escorted them through long halls filled with living walls that pulsed softly with light. Outside the palace, the city waited in tense silence. As they entered the council chamber, voices rose at once. "You endanger the empire. You protect an enemy. You hesitate when we should strike." Queen Zyranel stepped forward, her presence commanding silence without effort. "The war is paused," she said. "Not ended, but any who act without my command act against the empire itself." A tall warlord named Carvex emerged from the shadows of the chamber. His armor was dark and sharp, grown to intimidate. "The empire was built on strength," Carvex said. "Not hesitation. This human has weakened you." Eyes turned toward Elias. He felt them measuring him, judging him, waiting for fear. He did not give it to them. "He has done nothing," the queen said, "except speak truth." Carvex laughed. "Truth from a disposable species." Elias took a step forward before he could stop himself. Pain flared, but he stood. "Disposable doesn't mean silent," he said simply. Gasps echoed. A human speaking uninvited in the royal council was unthinkable. Carvex stepped closer. "You dare speak here?" Elias met his gaze. "You're scared," he said. "Because if the war stops, you lose what made you important." The chamber erupted in angry sounds. Guards shifted, hands near weapons. Queen Zyranel raised one hand. Silence returned. "The human speaks because I allow it," she said, "and because his words carry weight." Carvex turned to her. "Then test him. If he truly carries truth, let him prove it." The queen considered this. "What do you propose?" she asked. Carvex's eyes glowed. "Let him face the memory vault." Murmurs spread instantly. Even the calmest counselors shifted uneasily. Elias frowned. "That sounds bad." The queen looked at him. "The memory vault contains the true history of our people, not the edited version taught to our young. Few are allowed inside. Fewer survive unchanged." Elias swallowed. "And you want a human to walk through it?" Carvex nodded. "If he lies, his mind will break. If he speaks truth, he will endure." The queen studied Elias closely. "You do not have to do this." Elias thought of Earth, of soldiers who never came home, of wars that kept repeating because no one wanted to remember how they started. "I'll do it," he said. The vault lay deep beneath the palace. Its entrance was organic stone covered in ancient markings. The air felt old, heavy with memory. "This place does not harm the body," the queen warned. "Only the mind." Elias managed a small smile. "That's already been through worse." He stepped inside. The world vanished. He stood on a different planet under a burning red sky. Tall Velthari figures ran in panic as massive shadows fell from above. Cities burned. Children cried. He felt terror not his own flood through him. He saw the Velthari as prey. He saw a younger queen kneeling before another species, begging for mercy. He saw that mercy granted. The scene shifted. Generations passed in moments. The Velthari grew strong, proud, afraid of ever being weak again. They rewrote their story. Elias staggered but did not fall. He felt the temptation, too. The voice that said power was safety, that mercy was weakness. That domination prevented extinction. He remembered the whisper he had spoken. "You are becoming what almost destroyed you." He spoke again, aloud this time, though no one stood before him. "You survived because someone chose not to finish you," he said. "That matters." The vision slowed, the pressure eased. When Elias stepped out of the vault, he collapsed to one knee, breathing hard. Guards rushed forward, but the queen stopped them. Carvex stared in disbelief. "Impossible." Elias looked up. "You didn't erase the truth," he said. "You just buried it." The queen turned to the council. "The vault confirms what was spoken," she said. "Our past was not conquest, it was survival through mercy." Some counselors lowered their heads, others looked angry. Carvex looked desperate. "You would throw away our strength," Carvex said. "No," the queen replied. "I would redefine it." At that moment the chamber shook. Reports flooded in through psychic channels. Rebel fleets had engaged loyal defenses. The pause was breaking. Carvex smiled. "It is too late." Queen Zyranel looked at Elias. "You showed us who we were, now we must choose who we become." Elias pushed himself upright. "Humans don't win every war," he said, "but we know something. You can't force peace, you have to protect it." "How?" she asked. "By standing where everyone expects violence," Elias said, "and refusing to give it." The queen straightened. She sent a command not of force, but of truth. The memory vault was open to every Velthari mind, not the pain, but the history, the forgotten mercy. Across the Empire, soldiers hesitated. Some lowered weapons, others stopped firing. Confusion spread, then understanding. Carvex roared in fury and charged toward the queen. He never reached her. Velthari guards moved, not to strike him down, but to restrain him. Soldiers who once followed him stepped back. "This is over," the queen said. Carvex collapsed, defeated not by power, but by choice. Hours later, the rebel fleets powered down. One by one, the war did not end that day, but it changed direction. Elias sat alone later, watching the city lights slowly brighten again. The queen joined him, standing beside him in silence. "You risked your mind," she said, "for a people not your own." Elias shrugged. "Someone once did the same for you." She looked at him with something new in her eyes. Gratitude. The galaxy had not yet healed, but for the first time it remembered. And that made all the difference. The days after the memory vault opened were strange and heavy. The war did not restart, but it did not truly end either. Across the Velthari Empire, soldiers stood in silence, staring at weapons they no longer felt sure about using. Some followed old orders out of habit. Others refused quietly. Confusion spread faster than anger. Queen Zyranel felt it all. Every thought, every doubt, every crack forming in an empire built on certainty pressed against her mind. She did not block it. She let it flow. Leadership, she realized, was not about silence. It was about listening. Elias Rook remained inside the palace under protection, though protection felt like the wrong word. Guards no longer watched him as a prisoner. They watched him as one watches a fragile but powerful thing, unsure whether to fear or respect it. He spent hours looking out over the city. Repair crews moved through the streets. Fires were being put out instead of fed. The sound of construction replaced the sound of weapons. It felt unreal. "You have changed them," a Velthari officer said one day, standing nearby. Elias shook his head slowly. "No," he said, "they changed themselves." The officer did not argue. Not everyone accepted the change. On distant fronts, Velthari commanders who had not opened their minds to the memory vault still held power. They saw the queen's actions as betrayal. To them, mercy was a disease spreading through the empire. One such commander was Fleet Lord Sevrak. His forces controlled a massive battle group near a human colony world. When the pause order reached him, he ignored it. Humans noticed first. Sensors detected Velthari ships powering weapons again. Colonists prepared for evacuation. Human defense fleets scrambled, unsure whether this was a mistake or the beginning of the war returning in full. On Earth and other human worlds, leaders faced a difficult choice: trust the Queen's pause or prepare for survival. Queen Zyranel received the reports with a calm face and a tired mind. "They will test the edge," she said to Elias. "They believe I will hesitate again." "And will you?" Elias asked. "Yes," she replied honestly, "but not in the way they expect." She called for a gathering, not a military council, not a war briefing. She summoned representatives from every Velthari caste, warriors, builders, scholars. Even civilians who had never held power before. She invited human observers as well, including Elias, though he stood quietly at the back. When they gathered, she spoke without command, without psychic force. "We were not always conquerors," she said. "We survived because mercy was given to us. We forgot that. Now we remember." Some listened with tears in their eyes, others listened with anger. "Our strength will no longer be measured by how much we take," she continued, "but by what we protect." The words spread beyond the chamber, broadcast across systems, shared not as law but as belief. Meanwhile, Fleet Lord Sevrak attacked. His ships struck the human colony's outer defenses with brutal force. Stations burned. Civilians fled. Human soldiers returned fire, holding the line with everything they had. News reached the palace within minutes. Elias felt his chest tighten. "That's my people," he said quietly. Queen Zyranel closed her eyes. "I will go," she said. The council erupted in protest. "You cannot expose yourself," they argued. "This is a trap." "Perhaps," she replied, "but peace that hides is not peace." She ordered her personal ship prepared. Elias stepped forward. "You're not going alone." She looked at him. "You are injured." "So are a lot of people out there," he said. "I can still stand." She considered this, then nodded. The journey was tense. As they approached the battle zone, the damage became clear. Wreckage drifted through space. Emergency signals cried out endlessly. Sevrak's fleet loomed ahead, weapons charged. The Queen opened all channels. "This is Queen Zyranel," her voice echoed. "Stand down," Sevrak answered with laughter. "You no longer speak for us," he said. "You chose weakness." "I chose memory," she replied, "and choice." Sevrak fired. The queen did not raise shields. Gasps filled the command deck. Elias gripped a rail, ready for impact, but the attack never landed. Velthari ships closest to Sevrak hesitated. Crews had seen the memory vault truth. They remembered mercy. One by one, they powered down weapons. Human ships noticed first. Confusion spread through both fleets. Sevrak roared orders, but fewer listened with each moment. Queen Zyranel spoke again, not with force, but with calm. "You are free to leave," she said, "or to stay and protect life instead of ending it." Silence followed. Then Sevrak's second-in-command cut engines. "I will not fire," the officer said. "Not today." More followed. Sevrak stood alone. Fury twisted his mind. He turned his weapons toward the Queen's ship again, this time personally. Elias moved before thinking. He stepped into the open channel. "This is Elias Rook," he said, his voice steady despite fear. "I'm human. You don't know me, but you know what you're afraid of." Sevrak snarled. "You should not exist." "Maybe," Elias replied, "but neither should endless war. You can kill us, you can even kill her, but you can't erase what your people remember now." Sevrak hesitated, just long enough. His own crew restrained him. The battle ended without another shot. Afterward, human medics and Velthari healers worked side by side, saving lives that hours earlier they would have ended. Images of this spread across the galaxy faster than fear ever had. Human leaders watched with disbelief. Velthari citizens watched with hope. Elias sat later in the quiet of the Queen's ship, exhaustion finally catching up to him. "You stood between fleets," Zyranel said, "without armor." Elias smiled weakly. "I'm used to bad ideas." She looked at him seriously. "You understand something many rulers do not. Courage is not loud." Outside, stars drifted calmly. No weapons fired, no orders screamed. The war was not over, but it was losing its grip. And across the galaxy, something fragile and powerful was growing. The idea that stopping was possible. The galaxy did not change in a single moment. It changed slowly, like a deep wound finally beginning to heal. After the standoff near the human colony, weapons did not vanish and fear did not disappear. But something important had shifted. The belief that war was the only answer had cracked. Queen Zyranel returned to her capital not as a conqueror, but as a leader who had chosen a different path. Crowds gathered silently as her ship descended. There was no celebration, no anger either. Only watching eyes, trying to understand what kind of future was arriving. Elias Rook walked beside her when she stepped onto the platform. He still wore human armor, repaired but marked by many battles. He looked out of place among the flowing Velthari forms, and yet no one challenged his presence. That alone told him how much had changed. The following weeks were filled with work that felt heavier than any battlefield. Negotiations replaced battles. Arguments replaced explosions. Old grudges surfaced, raw and painful, but they were spoken instead of acted upon. Human diplomats arrived cautiously. They did not trust the sudden calm. History had taught them to be careful. Queen Zyranel did not blame them. "You have survived too many broken promises," she said to them. "I would be disappointed if you trusted easily." Talks were held on neutral stations. Velthari and humans sat across from one another without weapons for the first time. At first, the air was thick with tension. Every movement was watched, every word was measured. Elias was not part of the talks. He did not want to be. He stayed on the edges, helping where he could. Sometimes that meant explaining humans to aliens. Sometimes it meant reminding humans that fear could speak louder than logic. He slept little. When he did sleep, he dreamed of the battlefield where the whisper began. But the dreams changed over time. The explosions faded. The silence stayed. One day, Queen Zyranel asked him to walk with her through the lower city. This was unheard of. Queens did not walk among citizens without guards and ceremony. She dismissed most of her escort. The city paused as they passed. Workers stopped. Children stared. Elders bowed their heads, not in fear, but respect mixed with uncertainty. "They are afraid," Elias said quietly. "Yes," the queen replied. "So am I." They stopped near a rebuilt shelter where Velthari and human refugees worked together distributing food. Elias watched as a Velthari child hesitated, then accepted a meal from a human soldier. The soldier smiled awkwardly. The child smiled back. "That," Elias said, "is how it starts." The queen watched closely. "Not with treaties," she said, "with moments." The final battles of the war did not end in fire. They ended in refusal. Isolated commanders tried to continue fighting, but fewer answered their calls. Supplies stopped coming, crews deserted, ships returned home without firing. War starved itself. Months passed. At last, a formal end was declared. Not just a ceasefire, but an agreement witnessed by dozens of species. Borders were redefined, reparations discussed, safeguards created. None of it was perfect, but it was real. The war that had consumed generations officially ended with signatures instead of screams. The galaxy exhaled. Humans were no longer seen as expendable troops. They were studied, sometimes feared, often misunderstood. But no one ignored them anymore. They had not won the war by force. They had ended it by reminding an empire who it once was. Elias Rook was offered many things: a place in the Velthari court, a title, protection, honor beyond anything he had imagined. He refused them all. "I'm a soldier," he said simply. "Not a symbol." Queen Zyranel accepted his answer, though something in her expression suggested she wished he had chosen differently. On the day he prepared to leave, she met him privately. "You changed the course of history," she said. "That cannot be undone." Elias shook his head. "You changed it," he replied. "I just spoke." She studied him carefully. "Words are not small things, human," he smiled. "Neither are choices." She reached out and placed a small object in his hand. It was simple, made of smooth crystal. "What is it?" he asked. "A record," she said, "of who we were and who we chose to be again." Elias closed his fingers around it. "I'll keep it safe." His ship departed quietly. No crowds, no speeches, just a single vessel slipping into the stars. When Elias returned to Earth, he did not seek attention. He returned to a life far from command centers and politics. He spent time with family he had not seen in years. He learned to sleep without alarms. News still reached him, slowly then less often. The galaxy stabilized. Trade routes reopened. Joint missions replaced invasions. Old enemies worked side by side, not because they trusted each other, but because they remembered the cost of not trying. Years later, historians would argue over what truly ended the war. Some would point to the memory vault, some to the Queen's courage, some to human unpredictability. A few would mention a wounded soldier who refused to raise a weapon. Elias never corrected them. On a distant Velthari world, a monument was built. Not of stone or metal, but of light. It showed no battles, only a single moment. A human leaning close to a queen, speaking quietly. No words were recorded, they were not needed. And when future conflicts rose, as they always did, leaders across the galaxy would pause and ask themselves a question that had once seemed impossible. What if we stop? What if we listen? What if we remember? That was the legacy of the Whisper, not power, not fear. But the strength to end a war,